Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Hammond, and I'm the Director of the Language Program Office at the UW-Madison. It is my great pleasure to welcome you back to the 2023 LCTL Career Fair for our keynote address with the U.S. diplomat, Lachlyn Soper, whose talk is titled Words at Work, Transforming Your Life with Language. Following the keynote, we'll start our second panel presentation of our professional development series titled Opportunities in Government for Speakers and Learners of Less Commonly Taught Languages, featuring colleagues from the NSA, CIA, Department of Defense, and the Department of State. This professional development series is organized by the Language Program Office and WISLI, and is made possible through the generous support of the Institute for Regional and International Studies, National Resource Center, and sponsored by UW-Madison Area Studies and National Resource Centers, UW-Madison partners, and statewide partners. Now in its fourth year, the LCTL Career Fair connects speakers of LCTLs with professional development and career opportunities. Leaders and experts from government to the private sector and human services will share personal stories and professional advice about living a multilingual professional life. Our key message is that learning LCTLs can open doors and elevate opportunities, and we're delighted to have so many UW and WISLI alumni serving as panelists. A note on what's up next in the fair tomorrow, July 28th at 2 p.m. Central Time, will be a panel on opportunities in human services for learners and users of less commonly taught languages. For today, we have a few housekeeping matters. Please submit questions using the Microsoft Teams Q&A feature, and cameras and microphones will remain off during the talk. I want to introduce you to Kylie Holland, our WISLI Program Coordinator for the Southeast Asian Summer Studies Institute, SIASI. Kylie will keep an eye on the Q&A to facilitate the discussion portion of this program. Next, I want to introduce you to Dr. Erlyn Bernard. Erlyn is the SIASI Language Director and Indonesian Flagship Language Initiatives Pedagogy Coordinator at UW. In her academic year position as Pedagogy Coordinator for LCTLs at the Department of Asian Languages and Cultures, she supervises the LCTL instructors at UW-Madison. She has conducted workshops on foreign language pedagogy and materials development for various institutions in the US, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Netherlands, and Singapore. Her work in professionalizing instruction in LCTLs is closely linked to the priorities set by the U.S. Department of Education and has helped raise the national profile of UW-Madison. And in 2012, she was honored with the Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Service. Dr. Bernard will have the honors now of introducing our keynote speaker. I will now pass it over to you, Erlyn.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura, for the generous introduction. So it's now time for me to introduce our honorable guest keynote speaker. It is really my great honor and utmost pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Lachlyn Soper. Mbak Lachlyn, as we fondly call her, was a former student of Bahasa Indonesia in SIASI. I fondly remember Mbak Lachlyn, the time I was the coordinator and the teacher of the Indonesian program at SIASI. It is such a proud moment now to be able to witness her incredible success in her career, having had the experience of an avid language learner. In the proper Indonesian way, I now ought to address her as Bu Lachlyn. So thank you, Bu Lachlyn, for allowing me this proud teacher moment as I give this introduction. So Lachlyn Soper is a diplomat with the U.S. Department of State with nearly 20 years of experience in public service. She most recently served as the U.S. Consul at Leipzig and also worked as the Chief of Staff for the Departments of State European and Eurasian Affairs Bureau in Washington. From 2016 to 2019, she served on a detail to the U.S. military to Stuttgart as a senior advisor for U.S. Africa Command. Prior to joining the State Department, Lachlyn worked as a researcher and team lead for the U.S. Department of Defense in Baghdad, where she earned a meritorious civilian service award. She has also worked for the United Nations in the West Bank and Syria. Lachlyn speaks Arabic, French, German, and of course, Indonesian. She holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Wisconsin and a master's in international relations from the Princeton University School of Public and International Affairs. So let us welcome Bu Lachlyn and her keynote talk entitled Words That Work, Transforming Your Life with Language. So the floor is yours now, Bu Lachlyn.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Ibu, Erlyn, and thank you also to you, Laura. It's really an honor to be with you today. And I come here as a U.S. diplomat and also in my personal capacity. So my opinions are my own and may not reflect the U.S. government, but are part of our tradition. And thanks to you, Ibu, Erlyn, and Laura, for your long-standing commitment to language learning at Wisconsin. Friends, I credit Erlyn with giving me the framework to learning languages. As Erlyn said, I was once in your shoes studying Indonesian at WISLI, and Erlyn at that time led the pedagogy for the program, similar to today. And it was on the first day of orientation, I remember sitting in a very hard chair, that Erlyn explained how it could be helpful to learn a second language like you were learning your first. So from day one, we learned Indonesian in Indonesian. The instructors made teaching look easy, but this took a lot of work and a lot of prep on their part. And I give credit to them, as this way of learning led me to retain the language much better than I would have otherwise. And 10 years later, when I was a newly minted diplomat, I took an Indonesian test and I surprised myself and scored as having professional competence. And this was a lot higher than I expected. You know, it had been years since I had spoken Indonesian. After studying WISLI that summer, I packed my bags for the island of Bali, which was not a hardship. And those moments among the rice terraces were a life-defining experience, and we'll come back to my favorite tropical island later. But in the intervening period between entering the Foreign Service and living on Bali, I had studied Arabic and Japanese. And so my high score in Bahasa Indonesia was a reflection of the world-class teaching that I received here by the lakes. So, terima kasih banyak, Ibu Erlyn. So congratulations. By choosing to study at WISLI, you have made a great decision. You are learning in a great institute, in a great setting. Studying a less commonly taught language, or as we say in the Foreign Service, a boutique language, will give you advantages in whatever career you choose, with benefits beyond the grammar and vocab you pick up this summer. So language learning is a superpower, and today I'm going to cover 3 topics to leverage this multilingual power to get ahead in work and life. So first, I'll tell you my story, focus on how knowing other languages has helped me in my career. Next, I'll give you a game plan for how to use your linguistic skills to enhance your job prospects. And then finally, I'll explain how proficiency has benefits that extend beyond grammar and vocabulary. So part 1, my journey. Language has played a pivotal role in my career, but it wasn't always part of my plan. When I enrolled at the University of Wisconsin, I imagined a future in medicine, and I thought, I'm smart, I should be a doctor. This is the path for me. But an array of fascinating courses and a discovery of the National Security Education Program, a government fellowship for study of language in non-Western countries, captivated my interest. So instead of spending my junior year in organic chemistry lab, I found myself studying near some very nice beaches in Bali. And before I left, a wise professor suggested I build a foundation in the language. Learn the alphabet, pick up some grammar. It's always beneficial to arrive in a country with an intermediate level. So this is a good tip and was the reason I came to WISLI. Already knowing some Indonesian gave me a boost, helping me build closer friendships and deep language skills. And in the non-academic, I'll call it the life education category, I saw live volcanoes and Komodo dragons. After that year in the tropics, I returned to Wisconsin and graduated with a degree in international relations. I then accepted a position teaching English in a small village in Japan working for the Japanese government. And bereft of a train line and English-speaking locals, this humble setting was a far cry from Tokyo's skyscrapers and bustle, but it was perfect for honing my Japanese. And as a tip to you all, rural environments can be great for language development. So living in these unique conditions, one of my favorite activities was snowboarding, of course, but also to sit on my tatami floor and work through kanji textbooks. After spending 2 years in Japan, I felt a calling to learn a global language and to work in women's empowerment. And this led me to a job at an NGO in Cairo. While there, I did external affairs for the NGO and used my free time to study Egyptian Arabic, employing textbooks and a private tutor. There's a saying in Egypt that when you drink from the Nile, you keep coming back or you get sick. And I found myself irresistibly drawn back to the Arab world. This interest led me to Princeton, where I studied public affairs and Middle Eastern studies. I received another NSEP, National Security Education Program grant to study Arabic in Damascus before the tragic violence that would later engulf Syria. My study of Arabic, first in its Egyptian and later Syrian dialects, opened the doors to a consultant role with the United Nations, where I worked in Arabic and did policy studies in refugee camps around Syria. So after obtaining my master's, I was eager to leverage my linguistic skills and accepted a role to become an advisor to the army in Baghdad. I appreciate the can-do spirit of the military and did impactful and meaningful service in Iraq, but I was more attracted to policy work, and at that time I didn't like early morning PT. So I took the Foreign Service Officer test in Baghdad. A year and a half later, I found myself in orientation and formally testing in the languages I had learned, like Indonesian. So as a diplomat, it is part of one's job to learn languages. And we have the honor of having Susan Falatko here, our diplomat in residence, also covering the University of Wisconsin and universities in the Midwest. And she may allude to that as well. The Foreign Service had me study Tagalog, which one can use around the world. I served in Yemen. I was evacuated, and in fact, my stuff is still in Yemen. I learned that it's okay to lose your things, but one thing I never got back, or will probably never get back, is all of my Arabic study notes and textbooks. And for the past 6 years, I've served in Bavaria and used German every day. Language, as you see from the personal sketch I just gave you, is a vital tool for communication. It's the vehicle through which we engage the world. And in diplomacy, proficiency in someone's mother tongue, particularly a less commonly spoken one, shows respect. And I have found people generally appreciate the effort. Leveraging my linguistic abilities, I've delivered speeches, engaged in casual conversations, made appearances on talk shows, and written articles in the language that I worked in. And this brings me to my second point. I talked about how linguistic skills created new opportunities and elevated my work. But now let's shift the focus to you. You will soon come to the end of the summer, and how will you leverage your language skills? I'll give you a hint to this open-ended question. The answer lies in understanding your broader goals. You're likely familiar with the advantages of setting goals. They increase motivation, enhance performance, help you focus on what's relevant, improve persistence, and even benefit mental health. When you understand why you need something, you're more motivated to pursue it. And this understanding provides a boost, making it easier to persist. So with this of mind, think of your 5 and your 10-year career aspirations and envision an end goal of your professional journey. And then we'll delve into the language goal setting, okay? If you don't know where to start, it's normal to be uncertain about your goals and your career path. In fact, figuring this out is its own journey. And it might seem overwhelming at first, so start with manageable steps. Here are some questions to start you on your path. First, what does your dream job look like? What does your ideal lifestyle entail? Where do you want to live? And how will language skills factor into your dream job? It takes time to identify your goals, but I promise you will get a return on all of the effort you put in to planning your future. And once you've looked ahead, examine what's happening right now. What activities bring you joy? What parts of your school or work day do you find the most satisfying? Why did you decide to study at WISLI this summer? There's data all around you to help. For example, browse LinkedIn and read how people describe themselves and their work. You can scroll through positions on USA Jobs. Do you find yourself envying someone's academic or work achievements? That's data. There are also several books and videos to help. Of the few that I have read, I do recommend Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, which offers the opportunity to explore design thinking, so welcoming hurdles and learning by doing as part of your strategy to find your dream life. If you're unsure, set some preliminary goals and beta test them. You're allowed to change your mind, and you will only gain from the experience. So let's return to language learning. Once you've made your overarching goals, you can decide how you will use and improve your multilingual competence. For these objectives, you can set SMART goals, an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART goals can be short-term or long-term, life goals, career goals. When you are intentional about your why, you'll find that your what becomes much more attainable. And this is because you bring more energy and focus. For example, some of you are studying Arabic. And so this is a language where it's crucial to decide early what type of language you're going to focus on. If your aim is to converse with people, which dialect are you going to choose? Do you want to read newspapers or the Quran? So I've lived and worked in Bavaria for the past few years, and here are some of the goals that I set for myself this spring, and they're part of this overall goal to become a proficient speaker of professional and colloquial German in the next few years. So first, I decided to conduct all of my work meetings in German, which I've achieved for the most part. Second, I plan to pass a test that qualifies me to attend a German university. Check. I try to write one LinkedIn post in German every week. And then I also had the goal of being able to effortlessly narrate a story in German to a friend. You can also set micro goals. For example, when I was evacuated from Yemen, I relocated temporarily to Korea. I didn't use Korean a lot in my job, but I learned a specific phrase that explained to taxi drivers how to get to my house. Take the tunnel, not the overpass, and exit on the left. So now let's talk about learning beyond the classroom, which is excellent, but it's like practicing your breaststroke outside of the water. To really swim, you need to dive in. So here are some specific tips. First, immerse yourself in a place where people around you use the language. A study abroad, a fellowship or work experience can be great opportunities. Second, phone a friend. Friends, and even better, partners are great for language learning. For example, I have a neighbor here in Bavaria, and we have a weekly meetup. We go for walks or we drink coffee, and we alternate between German one time and English the next. And I find it's important to keep them separate, so we're forced to speak and learn one language at a time. I've asked her to correct me, and I will correct her. But what happens most of the time is that she doesn't correct me because she's polite, but a closer friend like a partner, a boyfriend, or a girlfriend, or a language teacher will feel more comfortable giving you honest feedback. And by the way, once you've nailed the basics of grammar and vocabulary in your language learning journey, you'll find that nuances and native expressions become increasingly more important. Sure, you'll understand others and you'll be understood, but what you're saying may not align with how a native speaker will express it. And that's where expert guidance and correction come in to get you from that intermediate to the advanced level. I defer to Erilyn here on what level you're going to get to in that remark, but take this example. For example, if I wanted to say, I'm feeling warm or I'm hot, I would say, mir ist warm, which literally translates to, the warmth is happening to me. And if you were to translate, I am hot directly and say it in German, it would imply like, I'm really attractive and I need to be a contestant on Germany's Next Top Model. Language learning is full of these little idiosyncrasies, and that's part of the fun. And these are all tips, by the way, that I think sometimes we don't hear them when we're learning language. Maybe you're learning them at WISLI, but they're great to understand and reflect on as you begin on your language learning journey. So another strategy is to read books. To enhance my German skills, particularly my vocabulary, I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction, and I try to just read and enjoy it and looking at the vocabulary and looking up words only when I'm really struggling. There's many different strategies for reading, but it's something that I find that is fun, and I try to read a little bit in German every day, and at the very least, the headlines of the papers and magazines that I read. Reading expands your linguistic knowledge, but also gives you a deeper insight into the culture and nuances of the language. And I also think it's fun. And when you find an activity that brings you joy, it will make the learning effortless. And one challenging yet highly rewarding tactic is to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and to initiate conversation. Your receptive language skills, your listening and your reading, will always outpace your productive skills, like your speaking and your writing. So it's crucial to practice speaking to balance out your competence. Another thing you can do is to consider enrolling in a class in your target language alongside other speakers. And if it's even better, pursuing a degree if it's offered. By focusing on a subject, you'll improve your comprehension without even thinking about it. For instance, I recently earned a sustainability certificate from a German business school. And to pass the 3-hour exam, I was more preoccupied with getting the answers right than whether my grammar was spot on. Another thing that I really enjoy is watching TV in German. And even if you're studying a very rare or less commonly used language, you'll likely find YouTube or other sources for content. I watch 2 German shows every week. One is a political talk show similar to Meet the Press, while the other is The Bachelorette Germany, which is full of light on maybe content, but full of colloquial language and cultural references. Some may call it a guilty pleasure, but I view it as a language learning opportunity. And while we're at it, I'm sure you're already doing your homework. And with homework, I mean the broadest sense of the word. You need face time with language structure, especially in the early days. Resources like workbooks, YouTube, and other self-study methods are incredibly useful. Consistent exposure is critical for progress. For example, every day I take 15 minutes to learn Python because yes, computer languages count too. And on the subject of computers, AI tools can help you with your homework. I would say it's important to approach ChatGPT and other generative AI tools with realistic expectations. Just like a new workout program will tell you to consult your physician before trying, the warning with ChatGPT should be, please consult a native speaker or your language teacher. Although it's a fantastic resource, use it with caution, and ChatGPT might not support all languages or dialects. I tried using it for a conversation in Syrian Arabic, and it responded in modern standard Arabic instead. And for the non-Arabic speakers, that's like asking a question in today's everyday English and getting an answer back in Shakespearean prose. ChatGPT does offer 2 main helpful uses. And if you have more, I welcome, please share them in the comments about how you're using tools like this for your language learning. First, I'll call it the concierge function. ChatGPT can translate phrases between English and many other languages and help clarify the meanings and words and phrases in a way that's most helpful to you. When I feel stuck with a German sentence, I may ask, why is this preposition used instead of that one? And ChatGPT has given me a tailored example that has helped me. It can provide information about grammar, syntax, and vocabulary of many languages, and it can even explain cultural context and usage to a certain extent. The second main use would be for a study plan creation or worksheets and tests. And regardless of the language you're learning, you can ask ChatGPT to generate a study plan by inputting your language goals. And this is where setting clear goals, again, proves useful. In some cases, it can create exercises for you to practice simple language quizzes. For instance, I requested an 8-week study plan for Bavarian and for Indonesian and for Syrian Arabic. And to my surprise, the plans covered and the study plans all covered the same topics instead of individualized plans based on the context in which these languages are used. I mean, for example, Bavaria stereotypically has a lot of basic phrases on beer, farming, and Catholic saints. So I encourage you to ask your language teacher, if they haven't already discussed it, about how ChatGPT and AI tools handle the language that you're learning. And whatever you do, bottom line, be kind to yourself and aim high. As you proceed with your language journey, here are 2 key guidelines to ensure that you are kind to yourself. First, English is both a blessing and a curse. We have the advantage of fluency in a global language, making it easy for us to be understood almost anywhere in the world. However, this ubiquity of English can act as a barrier to full immersion. Often we might find that a basic proficiency is sufficient due to the wide understanding of English. I urge you to aim high. Strive for your goals and not just being adequate. And second, remember that language learning takes time. Going back to the WISLI orientation I attended, Ibu Erlin described how fluency is multifaceted. Although I am a native speaker of English, I don't have the vocabulary of a neurologist to explain how my brain works. We spent our school years acquiring our first languages, enriching our vocabulary and our comprehension. Even in graduate school, a colleague who had previously worked in the White House sat me down and explained the specific language I needed to use to draft an email to a potential mentor. Acknowledge that your language goals require commitment and effort. You could picture your language skills as a plant. You grow where you water. If you neglect to nurture your competency, your vocabulary may start to shrink. Your grasp on grammatical structures might wilt. However, with regular care and attention, you will flourish. Growth happens when you invest your time and energy. So last, I'll share the transformative power of language learning, taking us to the rice paddies in Bali. So picture this. Halfway through my study abroad program, I found myself in a small village with one paved road amidst vast rice terraces. This was a dear friend's hometown and too far away from the beach for tourists. And one night, the town had gathered around a makeshift stage on the road for a dance performance. The dim streetlights and the full moon lit up the stage, and the dancers wore traditional yellow lace blouses and batik sarongs and were performing the joged. This is a dance of seduction where they invite men and other people from the audience to dance with them. And their moves had a playful yet suggestive element. And one young man from the crowd took the invitation only to disgracefully touch in an inappropriate way one of the dancers. His behavior was highly inappropriate. So following the show, I expressed my displeasure to my friend, and my friend agreed, and he pointed out that the dancer was the one who was behaving shamelessly because he assumed I was talking about the girl, as the third person singular in Indonesian has no gender. And it was at that moment, under the full moon in this Balinese mountain village, that I picked up a life lesson that people think in different paradigms than us. And therefore, learning languages hones our ability to listen, concentrate, frame, and deliver messages. It heightens our social awareness, an asset invaluable in any career. So thank you for your attention. It's been an honor sharing these insights with you. Best of luck, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to share your language and career journey. Terima kasih.
Wow. Terima kasih banyak, Bu Lachlyn. Thank you so much, Lachlyn, for the amazing and inspiring talk that we all can learn so much from. So I'm going to now hand over the time to Kylie to manage the discussion session?
Sure. Thank you so much, Bu Erlin and Lachlyn. That was an amazing speech. Really enjoyed that talk. We have a question in the Q&A, and for everyone that is viewing, please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A feature in Teams. Ms. Lachlyn, our question here is, did you find WISLI or the Foreign Service language training to be more intensive? What are those intensive language programs like?
That's a great question. And I think intensity is a really interesting term and depends on your definition of it. Indonesian at Siasi at WISLI was 4 hours a day, and then a number of homework assignments after that. And I feel like 4 hours is really kind of the maximum that you would want to do in the classroom, maybe a little bit more. I do defer to experts like Ibu Erlin on this one. I would also say that whether or not the time in the classroom is intensive, that it's the time that you're spending, again, outside of the classroom, the homework you're doing, to really think about it. Because there is, of course, it's a social aspect, language, right? It's how we develop meaning and communicate with people. But there's also a lot of learning that takes place, as I mentioned, having face time with a textbook. So the level of intensity depends on you. The State Department has its own school for learning languages and a number of other classes like leadership, negotiation, that's called the Foreign Service Institute. And there's many languages taught there from around the world. Congress has mandated that diplomats, U.S. diplomats, learn certain languages before they head to their posts, to their embassies or consulates to serve overseas. And though they're taught in many different ways and in different styles.
Great, thank you so much. We have some other questions here. Here's one. Besides language skills, what else are valuable skills sought after for a U.S. diplomat?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm excited that whoever asked this question is considering a career in diplomacy, because it's an opportunity to live overseas and serve your country and implement and also make U.S. foreign policy. The skills that they're looking for are ones that you would expect: emotional intelligence, executive communication, writing, learning languages, of course, being also important. If you're interested in a career in diplomacy or with the State Department, I encourage you to visit the website careers.state.gov, and that provides a helpful overview of the positions available and some of the competencies and skills that they're looking for.
Thank you so much. Here's another question. How do you personally document your goals and track your progress in your language learning and professional growth?
That's a great question. I happen to be sitting at my desk at home. It's 9 p.m. here in Bavaria. And I'm showing you here, this is called the Das 6-Minuten Erfolgsjournal. So the 6-minute success journal. And so I wrote my goals at the beginning here. Sometimes I'm redoing them or crossing them out or writing new ones. And then I have a daily section here where I go over my plan for the day, and then I have a productivity tracker where I check off the goals that I'm learning. I use another thing here too. Maybe for the German speakers, this says Gewohnheitstrainer, so that the habit tracker. And so every day I've got my habits here and the goals based on my goals, and I check them. Like one of my goals says, it's probably hard to read my writing, it's hard for me to read my writing, I'm right here, is to study German or to read German for 15 minutes a day. Sometimes I read for 15 minutes, sometimes I read for an hour. I have, in fact, on my calendar a note to watch The Bachelorette and to watch Press Club, the German show. So those are how I keep track of my goals.
Oh, I'm a sucker for a to-do list, so that makes me happy.
Yes. And one more thing, if I can, Kylie, like,
please.
I come back at the end of the year and look at my goals for the year. And I'm not exaggerating. I am astounded that my goals almost always come true. If they're realistic, they're smart goals, that by writing them down, there's a power to writing them down, how they came into force.
Thank you for that addition. Okay, what do you enjoy most or find most rewarding about the work that you do?
Yes, I think that when we join careers in public service, you want to make a difference. And the highlights of my career have been opportunities when I have been able to help. And short example is during the evacuation of Afghanistan in 2021, I was in Germany, and there were many civilians. The U.S. Air Force was evacuating people from Kabul airport. And the deputy at the embassy in Berlin, he said, "Lachlyn, I need you to go to this U.S. Air Force base in Germany and help out with the effort." And as a result of my, but of course other people, it ended up being a team of about 60 Americans from different agencies in the U.S. government, and Germans and UN and international organizations. We made sure that 35,000 people came through this airbase direct from Kabul and made it to the United States. So I'm really proud of the fact that we provided shelter and food for them. And so that's what motivates me and makes me excited and to be able to help.
Wow, what an incredible accomplishment. Thank you. So we have a question here asking for some specific advice that you might have for preparing for the FSO application process. And if you can talk a little bit about what FSO is for those that might not know.
Sure, that's a great question, and I encourage whoever asked that. I'm sure that Susan Filatko, who is on the next panel on government, will be sharing more about a career in the Foreign Service and the State Department. I encourage you to go on to the careers.state.gov website and to take a look at the requirements that are offered. There's also what we call the 13 dimensions of the Foreign Service, of a career Foreign Service, and some of the dimensions of our work, and taking a look at how perhaps you have examples of how you have displayed these dimensions in your academic or personal or professional life.
Thank you. Now, I know you mentioned a little bit about LinkedIn, and so did some of our panelists from yesterday's talk as well. So we're wondering, what strategies do you recommend for using LinkedIn to create one's profile and to use it for networking?
Yes, that's LinkedIn is a great tool to build your network. There's a lot of articles out there about your strategy, so I'll say 3 things. First, begin with the end in mind. Like, what is your goal for being on LinkedIn? Yes, you should definitely, if you're going out in the career world, make a profile. I know that there are places on campus where you can do a professional headshot. So think about that and making sure that your experience is professional and there aren't any typos, and that you're putting your best foot forward on your profile. Second, I think as you build contacts and followers, that you think of it as an opportunity to build, to make friends, right? And to influence people. You may want to start out by following people that do things that are interesting to you, or have careers that are that you're interested in doing someday, and to looking at them and maybe commenting or providing a thoughtful comment on their posts, and then eventually posting on your own things that you're doing. Perhaps you're doing interesting research in one of your classes, or you're a PhD student and you just wrote a book, right? Like there's a lot of opportunities, and there's nearly, I think it's almost 1 billion people on LinkedIn. So find a community of people that are doing work that's interesting to you and that you have similarities with. And then the last thing I'll say about LinkedIn is to not be afraid to reach out to people cold and to introduce yourself, especially if you're a student, to say they asking for an informational interview. You can use ChatGPT, right, to find a nice template. Of course, make it your own. My warning label works for English, right? To take a look at it and to ask people, like, what is your job like? Do you mind if we have, like, how would you feel about a 20 to 30 minute phone conversation? And make it so easy for that person to say yes. And then follow up with a thank you either that same day or the next day, within 24 hours.
That's some great advice. Thank you so much. So I think we have time for another. Let's see. How can someone pursue a career in diplomacy that overlaps with academia?
Yes. Well, we have many ways of joining the State Department. And in addition to having career foreign service officers who usually serve at embassies or consulates overseas, or in Washington, or in other positions that they rotate every 1 to 3 years, we also have what are called civil servants who may be hired within the State Department for one specific job. And in that regard, we have a number of people who are experts in data science or historians. We have also climate scientists, people who are working on green hydrogen, for example, who may come on or be seconded to work as advisors, experts, if you will, for the State Department and also other U.S. government agencies to share their expertise. And then after a certain period of time, they may go back to the think tank or the institute or the academic institution where they serve. So that's one opportunity. And if you're in a field that has a practical sort of application, you can see there's a policy angle, then that's a possibility.
Thank you so much. We have one last question here. What was your experience working at an NGO in Cairo or as a consultant in refugee camps in Syria like? Did you find that because you were not a citizen, that you lacked the cultural or other knowledge needed to make policy decisions? And if yes, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And how do you know what you don't know, right? That if, I had studied Arabic at that point, I had lived in 5 countries in the Middle East, but how do you know what you're missing? And I think that's why you need to have these people who can speak truth to you, right? Like either language teachers or bosses or close friends. And I in both places had the advantage of working very closely with local nationals, with Syrians in Syria and Palestinians in the West Bank, and then Egyptians in Egypt who had deep experience in the topics they were doing. So I provided my own expertise and in policy studies, and I could speak to people in a conversational way. And then, of course, was relying for some cultural nuance understanding with some of my fantastic local colleagues. But I think that's a foot stomping point for whatever you're doing. You're in a new environment, and that's the same for the United States. You're in a new field, right? If I were to leave diplomacy and start consulting tomorrow, or management consulting, I would be in a different environment. I would need to learn that. And I want to go back to Ibu Erlin's example of like, yes, I may know how to talk about my brain, but I'm not a neurologist. That we have to be aware of our blind spots or what we don't know.
Thank you so much for answering our questions today. I will pass it back to Bu Erlyn.
All right. Well, thank you again. Terima kasih banyak to Bu Lachlyn for the inspiring talk and for also the very lively question and answer session. I wish that we have more time because there's still more questions out there, but unfortunately time is limited. And thank you for the audience also for your questions. And that's a lot of things that we could learn from our session today. We can have a short break before the next session that we will have the government panel.